Hi guys, I hope you're all well and welcome to episode 161 of the Layton Fitness podcast. First, I just want to say that at the end of last week, we've actually managed to break the 100,000 download mark. So I just really want to say thank you very much for all of those individuals who have listened to even just one podcast. I think this was created in January 2015, so just over 3 years now. So I really do appreciate those of you who have, like I said, just listened to even just one podcast. So thank you very much. We broke that 100,000 download mark, so I really am pleased that we've been able to achieve that, but I wouldn't have been able to achieve it without your help, so I really do appreciate that, so thank you very much. So firstly, let's dive straight into the podcast. So within this episode, we'll be discussing why you don't want to be training to failure all of the time. So you may be wondering, James, what on earth is failure? So failure is basically where you cannot get any more repetitions within a given set with a certain weight. So this will be where you literally cannot get any more reps within a given set with a certain weight unless you had help or a spotter come in. So that is absolute failure. So I'm going to tell you in this podcast why you don't want to be going to absolute failure all of the time. You may be wondering, surely that's how you make progress, that's how you build muscle within the muscle building phase, that's how you maintain strength better within the fat loss phase, and I'm going to tell you both of those are actually wrong. So you're probably wondering, where did this come from? Now, I personally think the biggest area where this came from is where a lot of information comes from within the fitness industry, and unfortunately it's typically from the biggest guy in the gym or the biggest guy online. And typically those individuals are taking anabolic steroids, they're taking drugs, and that therefore means that they can train in a certain way without actually seeing any of the negatives. So I'm going to tell you within this podcast why training to failure too frequently can really impede your strength gains, it can impede your muscle building potential, it can impede increasing volume over time. However, if you're a drug-assisted individual, you don't really have these issues just because, one, you're stimulating muscle protein synthesis more frequently, you can gain more strength than a natural trainee, you can recover much faster than a natural trainee, and that's why people that are on drugs train like this. They basically take every single set to failure, and then when people like myself or those of you listening to this podcast who are drug free, who are natural, they aspire to be like these guys and think, oh, I need to train like that. But the reality is it's more to do with the drugs that are allowing them to train in this style. So here's the big reason why we don't want to be training to absolute failure within a muscle building phase or a fat loss phase. Remember, within the muscle building phase, the whole goal is to increase volume over time. So remember that volume is sets times reps times load. So essentially that needs to be increasing over time. Essentially the total tonnage you're doing throughout your session and week, that needs to be gradually increasing. So that sounds complex, but in short, if you're getting stronger within the reps and sets you're currently doing, then volume will be going up by default. Additionally, if you start adding in more sets compared to what you're doing now, then volume will be going up as well. So that's just a couple of ways to increase volume. You can increase sets, you could also increase the load on the bar. There's a couple of methods to do that. So that needs to be essentially gradually increasing over time within the muscle building phase. But the biggest problem with training, especially your big compound exercises, to absolute failure, things like squats, deadlifts, bench press, overhead press, this is so draining on the body. It's extremely draining on the body to take a big heavy compound exercise to absolute failure. If you're taking multiple sets of these big compound exercises to failure within your session, it's very difficult to properly recover from these training sessions, and therefore it's very difficult to continually make strength and volume gains in the future because the body just cannot recover sufficiently from those training sessions, and therefore you get into a situation where it becomes very difficult to continue to gain strength and volume over time. Again, that's our main goal within the muscle building phase. Within the fat loss phase, our main goal is really trying to maintain strength to preserve lean muscle mass within the fat loss phase. And again, if you're taking sets to failure, especially within the fat loss phase when you're in a calorie deficit, you don't have the same calories as you do within a muscle building phase, it becomes even more difficult to recover from. So this is even more important within the fat loss phase as well. Then the other big reason, which is similar, is it can actually affect the acute training session itself in terms of in terms of volume. So let's say, for example, you're performing a bench press and you can perform, let's say, eight repetitions with 100 kilograms. So let's say, for example, within that first set you go to absolute failure. So you get 8 repetitions in that first set. All of you listening to this podcast know how much it can take it out of you for the following sets if you go to absolute failure on a big compound exercise for your first set. And therefore that second set you may only get 5 repetitions because you went to failure on that first set. So let's say on that second set you go to absolute failure again. So you get 5 repetitions on that second set, and then the final set you may only get 4 repetitions because you took the first 2 sets to failure, you took that last set to failure. So that means that's a total of 17 repetitions across all 3 of those sets. However, if you were a little bit more intelligent with your training, you basically didn't go to absolute failure on that first set. So let's say, for example, you get 7 on that first set. For that second set, you probably could get 7 again because you didn't go to absolute failure on the first set. You can probably get 7 repetitions again while keeping 1 rep in the tank. You didn't quite go to failure. And on that first set you may get 6 repetitions, but on this final set we do go to absolute failure. So essentially we've only taken 1 set to failure within this example. The last set we did 7, 7, 6, and therefore we're getting a total of 20 repetitions across all 3 of these sets. 20 repetitions versus 17 repetitions with the individual that took every single set to failure. So we're getting a total of 3 more repetitions across the board, and that therefore means that's quite a significant bump in volume, because remember, volume is sets times reps times load. So because the reps is going up, we're timesing that by the load and the sets, and that therefore means that volume is quite considerably greater within that example. And that's essentially what I want you to be focusing on with your main compound exercises, is holding at least 1 rep back in the tank until the absolute last set. You don't particularly even need to take that last set to failure, but if you want to, you can do. But again, the real key is just using failure in moderation. And then with your isolation exercises, things like bicep curls, lateral raises, tricep pushdowns, there's no reason why you can't take every set to failure, because ultimately these exercises aren't as draining on the body. We're only working 1 muscle group at a time, and if you take a set to failure on these exercises, it doesn't fatigue you as much acutely for the remaining sets. So that will be my practical applications. Try and hold 1 rep back in the tank at least until the final set of your big compound list, things like squats, deadlifts, bench press, overhead press, heavy rowing movements. Try and limit failure of these exercises, and then take your isolation exercises to failure. So hopefully that's been useful. That'll make a huge difference in terms of how much volume you can accumulate within a particular session, but it's also going to allow you to accumulate more strength and volume down the road, because you're not fatiguing the body too much where you just can't recover from those heavy compound failure sets. So hopefully this has been useful. Thank you very much for listening. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page for free ebook, and you can download that immediately. Additionally, if you're still yet to subscribe to the podcast, please do, so you don't miss an episode. Thank you very much. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Take care.